So, right now, the seeming finite mind supposedly looks out over a body and a room, observing a universe of objects and space. And just stop a moment and do that. Look about and see what seems to be there. Now, on what basis would the mind even say there is a body now holding this book or holding some audio device or doing whatever it appears to be doing? But on what basis would the mind right now say there is a body present to be doing that? And in fact, on what basis would it be said there is even a weighty physical world of time and space at all? The whole panorama of what seems to be experience at the moment, according to the senses, what is it that the mind is experiencing? What is it that's claiming it is there in the first place? It's all based on the five senses. It's, there was a big build up to that question, but not to make a big thing out of it. But that's the point. It's based entirely on sensory evidence. To even say there is finite or human experience would depend on the senses being there to sense it. Seeing it, hearing it, touching, tasting, and smelling it. And as was pointed out in the earlier chapters, if one were to take away the five sensations of human experience, all of the sights of it, all of the touches of it, all the sounds, the smells, and the taste, one could not even say there was such a thing as human experience. It would be gone. Now, let's really zero in and see exactly how this sensory experience seems to work and seems to fool. As an example, consider any everyday item sensed by the five senses. Say it's a nice red apple. How does the mind know anything about that apple, or even claim an apple is there in the first place? And just a suggestion at this point, at some time it may seem like one wants to actually take an apple and hold it in the hand and go through this exercise. That's possible, but it's recommended not to do that at first, actually, because this is dealing with what seems to be a hypnotic sense, and holding that apple in the hand can at first seem to be a very powerful influence and actually will impede or get in the way a little bit of the experience that is the point of this example we're going to walk through. So first do it just sort of saying or imagining that an apple is being held in the hand, and then at some point, if you care to go back over it with an actual, holding an actual apple, that's fine. But again, let us look at all the so-called evidence, and the only evidence that the mind is experiencing to say an apple is there. How does it work? The mind seems to experience a very specific visual sensation, which could also be called an appearance or a mental image of the apple. And let's say, okay, it's a red apple we're using, so that particular visual sensation of red color and roundish shape is one way that the mind differentiates an apple from another object, like a book or a hand or a baseball. Think about it. That color and that shape go with that particular item. Simultaneously with this visual sensation, the mind experiences a particular tactile or sense of touch related with the apple. There is, again, a feeling of weight and texture when holding it. Could be a feeling of temperature, too, if it was just taken out of the refrigerator. And you can imagine, even feel that in the fingers, even though there's no actual seeming apple there in the fingers, but you can feel it. Also, simultaneously, there may be a sense of sound associated with an apple, like crunching when a bite is taken. There also is a sensation of taste, and there's a scent or an odor. And what's going on is that each of the five senses is contributing its particular aspect of the apple to the mind, to the overall experience, And as a result of all the sensations that it experiences, the mind instantly says to itself, an apple is here. An extremely important point to note right here is that this same process we've just gone through of the five senses contributing their particular aspect of the apple to the mind, this same process holds true or applies to every single item in daily experience. To the extent that, it applies with a particular object, this same sensory input seemingly works the same for everything, and you'll notice it in your own experience if you experiment with this a little bit. When the senses combine in their normal operation, this is what results in what's called normal human activity. And this is how the sensing mind experiences its entire world. The mind experiences the five sensations, not all of them at all of the time. One is not always chewing and hearing and doing these things, all five at the same time, but constantly on a regular basis. And again, in our example here, this experience equals apple. Now, look at it again. One question that has long been pondered by philosophers concerns the nature of the substance of this whole apple experience. Exactly what kind of substance is one dealing with here? The entire and only basis on which the mind would say an apple is present is by way of the senses. Absolutely everything. Again, just to go over it, everything the mind would say or know about that apple is thanks to a visual sensation, a touch, a feel, a sound, a taste, and a smell. The entirety of the evidence is sensations. Now, ask yourself, what makes up the apple itself that supposedly is giving off this sensory experience to the mind? Really stop. Ask yourself what the apple itself consists of apart from those five sensations. When you try to think of what an apple is entirely apart from those five sensations, what happens? You aren't thinking of anything. And why aren't you thinking of anything? Because there isn't anything. There are only the sensations. There are not the sensations of an apple and an apple. Sensations are the entire and only so-called substance. There is no apple that is a standalone physical object out there or off there having its own substance in addition to the sensations experienced by the mind. The so-called apple, in quotes now, would be entirely mental, consisting 100% of sensations only. There is nothing beyond it, nothing more to the experience than those sensations. It stops right there. Go ahead. First take away the five sensations, and then see if you still can come up with an apple. It's non-existent. And here's the thing. The so-called apple as a separate solid object didn't go anywhere. It never was out there as a separate solid object in the first place. There was no apple out there. The mind's experiencing of sensations results in what is called a separate apple, but never is there actually a separate item out there. All there would be, look at the evidence, all there would be is a series of images, feelings, tastes, sounds, and smells experienced entirely by the mind. There is nothing else there. And one might ask, well, if it's just sensations or mental, then what did I chew and swallow at lunch today? Okay, exactly what is an apple anyway? Again, supposedly a roundish red fruit with a whitish pulp, visual image, a slightly sweet or tart taste, sensation, and a pleasant scent. Okay, but again, what would all that be? What even would chewing and swallowing be? When you really look at them, nothing but sensations. Chewing and swallowing are tactile sensations, really. And the way the mind experiences it, it has an illusory appearance on the level of the mind, as if there were a solid object apart from or objective to the mind. But there never is a separate physical item. The so-called apple, in quotes, would be a purely mental process, experienced entirely in or as thought only. The mind's sensations of apple, in quotes, and its very thinking that an apple is there is the same one process. The mind's sensations of apple, in quotes, would be exactly as the same as the mind's thought in terms of an apple. And what's also important about this is that this applies, again, to all things, repeat, all things that seem to be experienced throughout the day, during daily experience. All items do not have, are not there as objective, solid objects separate from the mind. All there would be to the whole thing is just this flow of sensations. And it is, again, literally inseparable from the mind's very thought of any item. And this is why so-called finite experience in the chapter Consciousness is neither physical or metaphysical, why there was so much emphasis on the metaphysical viewpoint, being that the entire seeming world and universe is mental only. And the apples show in yet another way that it truly is only mental, and that there never is the mind's experience and a physical object that the experience is coming from. There is only the mind's experiencing of sensations. And this is why the entire everyday world is referred to often as consisting only of just so much thought or mental stuff. And the importance of this cannot be overemphasized. Call it sensation, call it thought. Either way, mere mental stuff would be all there is to the whole of this experience. Never is there a physical, separate, solid object anywhere. Notice that while earlier one might have thought of, mistakenly, because we're all educated that way seemingly, might have thought of an apple as a solid object, but one cannot say that a mere mental image in thought, or a passing tactile feeling, or a taste or the hearing of a sound is a solid object. Those would be entirely mental phenomena, and they do not constitute a solid physical object. It's just a mental experience. And again, it's in this way that the flow of all sensations, and thus all would-be objects, in quotes, which are not really objects, this is why they're all referred to as just so much mental fluid. This means that the finite sense mind doesn't ever think about a condition. The mind is the condition. It could be a condition of happiness. It could be a condition of sickness. The mind doesn't know about it. The mind is that experience. The mind does not visit or think in terms of places. The mind literally is the places. It doesn't sense all the planets and things in the stellar universe as if they were separate, giving off those sensations. The mind is all the things. It is the universe. Again, metaphysical. Even the feeling of a body moving through empty space would be entirely sensations or mental. It's just that space feels a little less dense than an apple. And on this basis, it's clear that there never are separate physical objects, because there are no separate physical objects, but there are no objects that have in themselves different degrees of hardness or density. For example, say a ball of cotton compared to a stone. The different seeming densities really would be degrees of mental density, degrees of density of sensation or thought, because there are not objects that are separate. That's a whole new way of looking at the nature of density. And the traditional misconception always has been that sense data is taken in from a thing that is assumed to be out there and separate, assumed to be. But there never is a separate object or thing out there from which to take in sense data. That's the point. Rather, it always would be the finite sense mind experiencing itself, which it calls a body and universe of separate things. One more time, what's important is that all of so-called finite human daily experience and its entire universe would be the mind in its so-called operation. Here's the thing. Just notice in what seems to be daily experience, which is now seeming daily mental experience, when buying a car, a new dress, a new set of golf clubs, groceries, a house, anything, it really is a matter of buying a package of sensations. Next time you feel a desire to buy something on impulse, just stop and say, do I really need those sensations? Nothing wrong with it, but you might want to look at it in that light. Because what's going on is that it's really a state of thought, a mental state, buying into another mental state that it seems to resonate with. That's all that's going on. Even the store itself and the money exchanged would be more of the same mere sensory mind fluid or mind stuff. There is even another extremely important point to realize about all of this. This is huge. As a result of sensing things, in quotes, never does anything solid, separate, or physical remain after the sensations of it are experienced. Now just look at that. There is no object there giving off sensations. So after, to the mind, there are just sensations. So after the sensations are experienced, there's no object remaining there because there wasn't an object there to begin with. But how often is it assumed that this whole physical objective world of solid items is out there hanging around when it's not being sensed specifically by me, this particular body? Not the case. Never is there a standalone physical object left behind, so to speak, after the sensations of it are experienced. The mind's activity with the countless passing sensations it seems to have experienced over time never, repeat, never has left so much as a single, solid, separate object in its wake. And here's the other side of that coin. Equally, never is there a separate, solid apple or any other kind of item anywhere before the sensations of it are experienced, because there is no object there to be giving off the sensations to the mind. There are just the sensations. It makes clear drives it right home that there never is a physical, objective world out there. All bets are off at this point of what seems to be this physical material world. But Apple or any other so-called item always would be the exact same unsolid flow of sensations. And it doesn't matter how solid or separate it may seem at the instant it is sensed, and it will seem so. But at no time is there really a separate apple out there on its own, in addition to those fleeting, passing, never-present sensations of it. Everything finite, everything always is just this never-present flow. And this holds true for all would-be objects. This also, by the way, is consistent with what physics theorizes about today. Not to get too scientific here, but a theory in physics is that what appears to be the entire created or manifest world, the everyday world, is not there until the observer is there to observe it. It is seemingly created on the instant by the very observing of it, and that is perfectly consistent with what we're saying here on a finite basis. One thing that we're going to talk about shortly, though, is that it's not always specified as to who this observer is that's doing the observing. Usually it's meant by observer is meant the body, that the body is there to observe it, and then boom, this whole phenomenal world instantly appears, and then it's gone again, seemingly. But if you look closely at that, the body itself, or what is called the observer, actually is as much something that is seemingly observed as everything else. Because when having any experience, isn't the body, doesn't it appear to be there just like any other so-called object? Is the body any different from the apple? In so-called human experience, it never is mind and matter, nor is it mind over matter. The mind would be matter.